Welcome to the icing consistency and coloring video. The first thing I want to point out is I do have my icing already made, so if you haven't watched the video about making the icing, go and do that first. So here is our bowl of Stiff Peaks Consistency Crusting Buttercream Icing. So I've got this all ready to go. It's a nice, fluffy, and white consistency and color. And I do have a lid on my bowl because, like I said, this is a crusting buttercream. It will dry out if it's not covered, so I have kept it covered. I also have some half and half here with a 1/8 teaspoon measuring spoon in it. This is what I'm going to use for thinning out the consistency for making like a flood consistency or maybe a thinner detail consistency than what we have right here. You're going to want to add very, very small amount of liquid at a time. A little bit can go a long way. And so that's why I have the smallest measuring spoon that I own in here. That way I don't accidentally add too much liquid. If you do end up adding too much liquid, it's not the end of the world. You can just add some powdered sugar back in and mix it up to thicken it back up. But it's easier to just not have to do that. So just add a very small amount of. The other things I've got, I have some bowls for mixing up my different colors and consistencies. I have some spatulas because you will want to use those for doing the mixing. They're nice because you can scrape off the bowl while you're mixing. When I first started out, I used a spoon instead of a spatula. Totally fine, not a problem. You can do that. I have a cup and some piping bags. So if you're ready to start decorating as soon as you're done with your mixing, go ahead and just bag up your icings. And the cup is great because you stick your icing bag into the cup, fold it over, and then it's ready to fill and you're ready to go. Now, when you're done filling your icing bag, you can either tie the top off. If you just have a very small amount of icing and you have enough up here, you just twist it and tie it. Or I have these bag clips that I use for sealing the top of the bag, and that works great. Now, if you don't have icing bags, you can also just use a Ziploc bag and just cut one of the tips off and decorate using that. That should work too. I also have my colors. So food coloring, generally speaking, you're going to want to go with gel versus liquid, just simply because it's more concentrated, and the liquid food coloring will water down your icing pretty quickly and change the consistency of it. And then you might end up with a really runny consistency. You just get more vibrant colors faster with a smaller amount of food coloring when you use the gel. Now, if you're not planning on decorating right away, like let's say we're mixing up our colors, we're mixing up our consistencies, but we're not actually going to get around to decorating until maybe tomorrow or the next day, then I would say don't bag your icings right now. I would just leave them in a bowl and cover it with plastic wrap or put it in some type of container with a lid. Okay, now here's the first thing that's a good tip. You're going to want to mix up all of your colors first and then separate the colors out to mix up your separate consistencies of those colors. So what I mean is, it might seem like a good idea to go ahead and separate out all of your white into like 2 batches. One for detail consistency and one for flood, and go ahead and, add your half and half and mix it down to flood consistency. But then think about how then you're going to have to mix up 2 different batches of each color, and you're going to have to try to get them to be exactly the same color and match perfectly. That can be tricky. So the easier way to do it is go ahead and separate your icing. I'm going to be doing white, blue, orange, and a very small amount of brown. So I have my 4 bowls here for my 4 different colors. I'm going to mix up the colors first with it being this stiff consistency. And then once I have my colors to just the right shade that I want them, then at that point I can take part of my blue out, put it in another bowl, and mix that up to be the flood consistency and the other one to be the detail consistency, and that way they will be the same color and match perfectly. The other thing is, like I mentioned before, your food coloring can water down your icing as well. That can change the consistency. So that's another reason why it's better to just go ahead and mix the colors, and then after you mix the colors, that's when you mix your consistencies. Okay, time to mix up our colors. Let's take some of our beautiful fluffy white buttercream and put some in this bowl, and then we'll put some in this bowl, some in here, and a little bit in this one. I do not need much brown at all, so I'm not going to do much of that one. Add a little bit more to each one. And remember to allow for the fact that you are going to be wanting to mix up however many consistencies you need for each color, and add as much as you need to allow for that. All right, that should be plenty. I think that's all I need of each color that I'm doing. And while I'm working on one of these, I will cover up the rest with plastic wrap to prevent them from drying out. I'm going to start off with my blue. Now, when you're adding food coloring, you really want to add a very small amount to start with. You can always add more, but it's hard if you get an oversaturated color or it's too dark. It's really hard to take that back. What you would do if that did happen, let's say I just squirted way too much blue in here and it's just so much darker than what I intended. What I would do is I would mix it all up. Then I would just take a small amount of that and put that in a new bowl and mix in some fresh white icing with that. And then maybe add just a little bit more of this until I get the right color. That would be easier than trying to take white and adding it into the blue, because that could take forever and you could end up using a huge amount of icing to try to bring the color down to a lighter color than what you ended up with. So basically, if you oversaturate your icing, use your oversaturated icing as your new food coloring and add that to white icing and mix that to try to get the right color. All right, so let's add a little bit of blue. That's just a little drop. I don't really want my blue to be super oversaturated or bright. So I'm going to start small. I'm pretty sure I'll end up having to add more, but better to start light and then go darker. Also, when your buttercream dries on your cookies, sometimes it will get a little bit darker. So keep that in mind, that it might darken up a little bit on your cookie. All right, so that's hardly any color at all. Let's add a little bit more. I'll do a little bit more this time than I did last time. You can tell that's still a very small amount. I just did 3 tiny little droplets where I just barely touched the tip of the food coloring to the icing. And again, make sure you're incorporating everything off of the sides and bottom of your bowl. That way you know that you are dealing with the correct color. Still super light, so we can be a little bit more generous. All right, let's mix up this blue. This is looking really pretty now. Ooh, I do like this. This is looking really nice. We're definitely seeing more of that blue color that I'm going for. This is really just kind of a see how it goes kind of thing. Pretty much every time you're mixing colors, it's like mixing up paint, where you're just going to have to experiment. If you're not getting exactly the right color that you're aiming for, think about the color wheel, if you're familiar with that. Think about what colors mix together to form other colors and how you might experiment with adding in a little bit of something else to get your color to be just what you're looking for. This is actually I think this is actually just what I'm looking for. This is a really pretty pale blue, and I think that is the color that I would like it to be. I was thinking about maybe adding a little bit of this turquoise to my blue to get it a little bit more of a bluish green, but gosh, I really like this pale blue, so I think I'm just gonna leave it the color that it is right now. That looks really pretty. And then if I change my mind, after I mix my other colors that are gonna be part of the same cookie set, I can come back and I can add a little bit more colors. So once you mix up all the colors for a particular set of cookies that you're doing, you might see, I think I actually want this to be a little bit more saturated so that it matches better with the other colors in my set. And then you can come back and add a little bit more coloring to it. For our next color, I'm going to make an orange. This one I have is just orange. This one is called neon orange. I don't know if I'm going to want to mix in the neon or not, but let's start by adding a drop of orange and see how it looks. Oh, also, I am noticing, just looking at this blue that I mixed up earlier, just from adding that food coloring that I added, already I can see that it's getting a more flood type consistency and less of the detail consistency just from that little bit of liquid that we added with the food coloring. It's still a nice thick detail consistency, and you can see that it's not settling down completely on the top, but it is settling down a lot more than this one was. So just keep that in mind. Okay, now just for fun, I think I will add a little bit of this neon orange, see if it does anything different. We'll do 2 drops of that. At this point, I have almost like an orange sherbet color going on, which is really pretty. Okay, still want a little bit more. Now, if you're going for more of a muted color, perhaps you want it to be a little bit of a dingier color, not quite as bright as this, you can try adding a little bit, like a teeny tiny little bit of black, or maybe a little bit of brown, something darker, just to give it a little bit of a darker tone instead of this bright, clean color that I have right here. That is pretty. All right, let's do a little bit more. I still want it to be a little bit more saturated. Okay, I like that. I think this is a nice shade of orange. I'm happy with it, so I'm going to stick with it as it is. Okay, now I'm going to mix up my brown. For brown, if you want to have, or you don't mind having a chocolatey flavor buttercream, you can add some brown cocoa powder, and that can give you a nice shade of brown, or just a base to start with. You can also obviously use the brown food coloring, which is what I have right here. And speaking of using cocoa powder, if you're looking for a nice black color, black can be kind of a difficult color to achieve in icing because it is so dark, and you have to use quite a bit of black food coloring to achieve it. So instead of relying just on black food coloring, you can actually use black cocoa powder. I will show you, I have some of it and I will show it to you. Okay, so this is, I got this on Amazon. This is called the Cocoa Trader, that's the brand, but it is black Dutched cocoa powder. And the best way that I can describe this is that If you think of an Oreo cookie, how the chocolate cookie part is almost like a black cookie, it's not really brown, that's, I think, what they use to make them is this kind of cocoa powder, because this is a black color, it's not brown, and it does have a flavor kind of like an Oreo cookie when you eat it with your mixed into your icing. So this is my best tip for making a really good black color, very nicely saturated, stays black, and it tastes good too. So if you want to mix up some black icing, get some of this black Dutch cocoa powder. All right, back to our brown. So I've got a little bit of a pale brown color. Now for brown is basically the combination of the three primary colors mixed together. So you have the red, the yellow, and the blue. So if you find that your brown, like this brown I feel looks a little bit reddish in tone. So what I could do is I could add a little bit of blue to it, maybe a little bit of yellow. Let's try that, see what happens. And that might end up being easier than just adding more brown food coloring. So let's just add a little drop of blue and we'll see what happens to our brown. Because it was such a reddish tone before, it might end up looking almost purplish since red and blue makes purple. So this brown is looking pretty nice. If you wanted to get it really dark and deep, you could try adding some black to the brown. I'm actually pretty happy with this. It ends up looking kind of like a chocolate ice cream brown right now, and I feel like that actually goes really well with my orange sherbet color and pale blue that I mixed up earlier. So I'm pretty happy with the way these three colors look together. So I'm going to leave it like that. All right, so now we have, this is all of my colors that I've mixed up that I need for my cookie set. And so the next step we're gonna do is going to be thinning out to make a flood consistency. So I'm going to demonstrate making the flood consistency with my white. And so right now I'm going to scoop a little bit of this white that's the thicker consistency. I'm going to put this in a smaller bowl. I'm going to save this to be my detail consistency white because you usually don't need very much of the detail consistency. I'll put a little bit more in there. That should be plenty. And then the rest I'm going to thin it down into a flood consistency. So I have my 1/2 and 1/2 and my 1/8 teaspoon, and I'm going to just put in one. I'm going to go ahead and do another one. Those were not totally full 1/8 of a teaspoonfuls. They were like maybe 1/2 to 3/4 full. And this is very important to mix thoroughly so that you know what your consistency is. All right, right now we've got, see what happens when I hold my spatula up? It globs and then that's it. Now, when you have a nice flood consistency, you're going to have a blob and then it's going to ribbon after that. This is not ribboning yet, so we know that we're not ready. So I'm going to do another whole 1/8 of a teaspoon and another 1/2 of one. And what we're looking for is called the 15-second flood consistency. And what that means is that after you count to 15, your icing will level itself out to be flat. And that way you will have a smooth flood on your cookie after 15 seconds of sitting still. And sometimes you might have to jiggle it a little bit like this to flatten it out. Sometimes you want to tap it, but eventually it's going to level itself out. That's the ideal that you want for a flood consistency, because you want a nice, smooth, even surface without having to work at that. Now it looks like we're actually getting that right here. After just jiggling it and doing that, I'm getting a smooth surface. So let's go ahead and try counting to 15 and see what we get. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So at this point, I can still see the lines in here that I drew with my spatula, but if I shake it a lot and tap it, it does start to get smooth. It's not quite there. Even after shaking and tapping, I still see a little bit of a line, so I'm probably gonna add a little bit more of the half and half. Okay, so I just added a little bit more half and half. I'm gonna mix that in. And then try out the glob and ribbon. And it's not totally ribboning still at this point, so I'm gonna add just a touch more. Let's see what we've got now. Mix it up. And that looks pretty good. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And then if I shake it a little bit, it does completely level itself out at this point. So I'm pretty happy with that for a flood consistency. Now, I am not going to be decorating cookies right at this exact moment, so I am going to just cover these up with plastic wrap and then bag them up when I'm ready to decorate. That way I can remix them one more time before putting them in the bags, because sometimes in the bag the color might separate out a little bit, and then it's better to just be able to freshly mix it before you put it in the bag and then decorate immediately. There you have it. This is how you make your colors and how you make your different consistencies that you're going to use for decorating your cookies. I hope that was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for joining me.